half of travelers start with an airline booking. But, if I'm the front door, why am I not selling hotel and car effectively? Why is Booking.com worth more than the top 4 airlines combined? They look at themselves as, we're about flying big silver birds around. I think you have to expand the vision of what your company can be from what it's always been.
To kind of get this started for the listeners, share a little bit about your background. Like, how did you get interested in travel, and that led to starting a travel company, American Airlines? Like, just how did that all start?
I was a history major in college, and I do believe in liberal arts. I mean, you learn how to learn. And my senior year, I graduated. I thought I was going to Vietnam. I was drafted and amazingly rejected from the draft for a bad back. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And my college roommate, dad, was a pilot for Trans World Airlines. So he had a free pass. He said, I'm going to lose that when I go to grad school. So I'm going around the world for a year. So 2 of us said, well, job prospects are poor right now. Economy was bad. We went around the world for a year. I came back. I said, I want to get in the travel business. So much to my father's chagrin, because he just paid for a college education, I went to school at night, learned how to write tickets and compute prices, became a travel agent. 6 months in, my boss said, let's go start our own travel agency. And we did that. It was focused on Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, which at the time, Brezhnev and Nixon were friends. So they were trying to burgeon travel to the USSR. And in 5 years, we created the 50th largest travel agency in the U.S. So that was my first startup. And over time, during that 5 years, the airlines put out computers into travel agents so we could make reservations, because prices had just been deregulated. So you couldn't figure out the price. You had to call somebody. And I got interested in computing. So I jumped to a back office travel computing company that did ticketing and invoicing and accounting, and was in sales, and later in product development, and ran the product for that computer company. And after about another 6 months in, we sold that company to American Airlines. And so we were now part of the Sabre division. So that's kind of how I got into it, a travel agent background, and then got into the business of automating travel agents.
How did you see the idea? Because there's so many ideas floating out there, and very few can take them and ideate in a way that really gets there. But how do you've done this twice now, and you've been involved in a number of other companies that are doing it. What's different about how you think about the idea and this real problem to solve for?
Well, most ideas are not cut from whole cloth, inventing nuclear power or something. It's normally an advancement on what is already there. So my boss, who was CIO at American, early on had said, we've got these new things coming out, these online networks, Prodigy, CompuServe, AOL. We should put reservations out there and let people make a reservation, but not buy the ticket. They should get the ticket from the travel agent, because the travel agent's our customer. So we did that. And after about 6 years of that running, the travel agents woke up and said, you're selling bullets to the enemy. You should turn that off. They saw what was going to happen over time. And our chairman, Bob Crandall, said, no, give it to Jones. By that time, I was running IT. I was CIO. He used to be a travel agent. We'll hide it over in IT. Well, the first thing I did when I looked at it, it said, hey, it's 1996. Why isn't this on the internet? And the internet in 96 was just beginning. And that was sort of the stroke that rocket fueled this thing, because we knew that people wanted to make their own reservations. We had that history from the online systems we'd had for years. But, those networks had limited reach. With the internet, it looked like this was going to be a great product. And it turns out that because the prices change constantly, that's one reason it was a success. Another reason is that buying travel is visual. You want to see a picture of the hotel. You want to understand where you're going. So it was sort of uniquely suited to becoming what is now the largest part of e-commerce on the internet is travel. So I guess I got to lead the team that grew that into a multi-billion-dollar business. But it was an iteration from being in travel agencies to being in online marketplaces to being on the internet. And what was interesting was pretty soon after being on the internet, we realized the travel agents really weren't going to be our ticketing outlet. They weren't satisfying our customers. These bookings would show up and they were like, where did these come from? So then we took a big step, which many companies didn't do. We competed with our own channel. We decided to become Travelocity became a travel agency. And that was a risky step. But again, you had support of the upper management who said, somebody's going to do this. We're uniquely positioned. Go run with it.
Yeah, and how did Orbitz disrupt all that at some point?
Well, Orbitz, you know, the world's largest airlines got together and built their own travel agency. And I went to the government to complain and said, this is clearly antitrust because they've said they're going to combine into their own website and only offer the lowest prices on their website. I said, what would you think? I said it to President Clinton. If Ford, GM, and Chrysler got together and formed Cars.com, and that was the low price spread, he said, well, that'd be illegal. I said, what about the airlines? He said, oh, airlines are different. So it didn't get antitrust, just as Google never has, really. And, but they did disrupt. They were a good competitor. It was tough. But, the travel market is huge. So between Expedia, Travelocity, Priceline, Orbitz, there was more than enough room. My competition wasn't really those guys. It was the telephone. It was the old way of doing business. So my job was to convince people it was easier to book online. It was smarter to book online. And that was our goal, was to take share from the physical world and worry less about competing with the other online guys.
Yeah, interesting. Where do you see it going? We're 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. Where do you see it going?
Well, I think, look, 10 years ago, I got a call from Ginny Rometty, the chairman of IBM, who I knew from because I'm a public speaker. And she said, can you come teach IBM Watson about travel? And that led to a travel AI company 10 years ago. Now, we were using natural language search. I want to go to the Caribbean with my family in January and want a deluxe hotel with spa and kid stuff, right? And you could actually find something. The code worked great. We analyzed millions of images. So if you said the word golf, well, you weren't going to see a picture of the front of the hotel. You're going to see a picture of the golf course or the spa, right? And guess what? The review would be about how great it was for kids. So it was all about shortening the time between search and result. And the code worked great. Nobody was ready to take a chance on AI 10 years ago. There was no pressure. And a lot of companies operate out of fear, right? So they didn't want to rock the boat. Today, if I had that company, I could probably raise $100 million this afternoon. And AI is going to have a big impact. I think it'll be interesting to see how OpenAI and Perplexity and others, now that they're integrating shopping and they've integrated a shopping cart, how they're going to compete in travel. Because a very large percent, something like 25% of people really are starting their travel investigation now with the AI products. Now, the big guys, Expedia and Booking, are tapping their toe a little bit in the water of AI. They've experimented with products, but I think they're going to have real competition. I think the user interface, people say AI is the new UI. I think the interface will change how we interact, and voice will be a big part of that. And we'll see, the brands, particularly hotels and some of the airlines, are wondering, can they kill the intermediaries? They don't like paying Expedia and Booking and others. So I think it's another chance, just like the internet was, for a good amount of disruption in the marketplace.
For a consumer, I think it's getting overwhelming and frustrating because with AI, what I'm noticing is everybody's starting to look and feel the same. So it feels like this great homogenization because everybody's pulling from the same place to present what they do. And then I'm noticing on my like a lighting app on my phone to change lights in the house, my smartwatch, all of a sudden I'm getting all these shopping pop-ups that were never there before. And that's why I got this thing. And so I'm just kind of almost getting done with all of it. I love AI as a tool, but oh my gosh, how do you know if everybody looks and feels the same, but only 10% provide incredible service? How do we pick through that? How do we decide? Where do you see that evolution going?
Well, look, I think Expedia and Booking look the same today. I mean, they really aren't very different. I mean, Expedia has Travelocity and Orbit's inside it, but if you use them, they just look like Expedia. Excuse me. And so I think that's why people go to 30 different sites, because they're basically walking down the row of slot machines, putting in a quarter, pulling, hoping they're going to get the lowest price. That's never going to happen because prices change by the millisecond. It's like doing that in the stock market. I think people will migrate to websites that use AI to create a better planning experience. Planning and booking on the internet have always been separate. When we started Travelocity, we had like 4 buttons. 2 of them were booking and 2 of them were experiences and planning and stuff. Nobody ever clicked the experiences planning. We thought it would be big. We started a magazine. No, people said, you are a ticket ATM. That's what we want you for. And planning took place on TripAdvisor and memes and, blogs and other places. And that occurs today. A lot of people use Instagram for travel, to get travel ideas and other social tools. But there are these sites that will plan your whole trip. So I advise a company called Route Perfect in Israel. And there it says, you can say, look, I want to go from London to Milan. I've got 2 weeks. I'm into history and wine and like concerts. And it'll plan a trip for you. It'll plan a route for you. It'll show you the hotels, show you where to stay. It'll tell you what to do in every city. And of course, you can buy the airline tickets as well. So I think AI could let us get back to what a great travel agent did. I went to see a travel agency when I was learning to be a travel agent, and this guy was a genius. You'd talk to him about where you wanted to go, and he would pull 3x5 cards from these little file drawers, and each one was a little piece of an itinerary. And he'd kind of assemble it, and he'd give it to an assistant who would type it up, and you'd have your whole trip. Well, now that's happening with AI, of course. And I think if people involve personalization into what they're doing with AI, then it can really be attractive. So I'm chairman of an AI company in Canada called Amgen, and we do business travel automation. So believe it or not, about 30% of those bookings that are made offline, not online, are not made over the phone. They're made by email. I want to go to London tomorrow, stay at the Ritz, and come back Friday. Well, that's a terrible process of back and forth with emails and screenshots, and it's not very good. So we use AI to read the email and come back with, here's 3 great travel suggestions for you, right? But we also run that through corporate travel policy to say you're supposed to fly on Delta and you're supposed to stay at a Marriott. We also look at thousands of past trips to say, what's your preferred airline and what's your preferred hotel and where do you like to sit? And once we added that personalization, then the bookings really started to go up. So I think you can use data in ways to highly personalize the travel experience in ways that haven't been done before.
Well, that makes it a lot easier, and that can be a pain. I used to travel all over the world, some years 8 months out of the year, and it always goes sideways, from time to time. That's just part of the deal. But I've heard you say, stop fighting over the details, make it easy, and as sort of the mindset and think that way. And I remember I was thinking back to my aerospace days, and there was a large emergency medical transport helicopter operator. And for, I don't know, like 5 years, we and a dozen or more competitors fighting over repairing drivetrain components. And I'm listening to this in a room, and their CFO was there. And I said, how about this? We'll look at your total cost for maintenance and all the drivetrain components. And it was significant. We'll cut it by 10% and hold the price for 3 years. And it was like a drop the mic moment. Sign us up right now. We'll go do that. It's like looking for that thing.
More and more companies, their business model is outcomes, not iron. So, for example, I worked with Honeywell for a while, and they, of course, have sensors in all kinds of factories. And the sensor would turn on a red light, say the compressor failed. And then they went to more intelligence. So the sensor came up on a computer and would tell you more. Now, they automatically dispatch maintenance and fix it and have predictive maintenance to know when it's going to fail. And they sell you uptime. Philips went to Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam and said, instead of selling you light bulbs, we want to sell you light. And they got a contract to light the airport for 5 years. Well, they had the data to do that. And they put in bulbs that lasted way longer, and they recycle the bulbs, and they were able to reduce power consumption and ended up with a much more profitable contract than just selling a piece of iron, just like you did with the helicopters, because the data is there to do it.
Yeah, so this is really interesting for the listeners, and I get to work with a lot of different businesses selling the outcome that will make our customers more successful in whatever that is, consumer or business, makes so much more sense than expecting them to connect the dots to how wonderful we think our stuff is, right?
Well, that's right. And Honeywell is down there at the bottom of the food chain looking up, and who's coming down? Microsoft, from an enterprise software perspective. Oh, we'll run everything for you. So they had to change their value, or they just get specced out as a component. Right now, they're into the infrastructure, and they do much more. I mean, I was talking to one of the companies yesterday. We're doing our budget for next year, and this company has won the top 5 customers in the world for a particular product. I said, great. And next year, you're going to have all their volume with the one thing we do. How are you going to grow the year after that? And there was kind of silence. And I said, we got to have more products. We're in the door. What else is wrong? Let's spend time talking to we automated this part of their business with AI. What else can we do? Because you're either going to grow geographically, or you're going to grow by expanding your product base, or you have to wait for the market to grow if you have the 5 biggest. And investors won't wait for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. So business model, this is fascinating for me, because when I go into a new organization to work with them or invest in them, buy them, whatever, I've got a number of different ways that I do it. Usually 100% of the time, or at least 99% of the time, all the leaders don't understand the business model. And so how do they make really good decisions around that? And even the CEOs explain your business model to me, and I get answers that don't make a lot of sense. And sometimes almost like I've just asked the question for the first time, the first time they heard the question. Why is that, do you think? And then what's key to make sure we get business model right? I have my thoughts around that, but what do you think?
Well, I think you have to understand what business you're in, clearly. And I think particularly today, it's expanding the vision of that model. Take airlines. They say they're in the business of flying people from here to there. Half of travelers start with an airline booking. But, if I'm the front door, why am I not selling hotel and car effectively? Why is booking.com worth more than the top 4 airlines combined? Because they sell hotels, which are a whole lot more profitable than airline tickets. And airlines are getting, half the people coming to them, and they're doing a terrible job of selling other stuff. They could sell the whole trip, but they look at themselves as, we're about flying big silver birds around. We're the front door of travel. So I think you have to expand the vision, of what your company can be, from what it's always been. And, then you take tools that help you do that. So John Deere, for example, is their tractor is now a platform for the farm. And they're using AI with lasers to kill weeds, and they're telling you where you need more water, and they're connected to a weather company, and they're connected to a seed company, and they become a platform. And guess what? AI is a learning system. So it's going to learn your farm and make you more productive. And when it does that, are you going to go to Massey Ferguson? No, because they don't have the data. And that's what's so impactful about AI systems is that they're learning systems. I think it's the most important thing about AI. If your competitor has a learning system, Tesla has 10 billion miles of travel that they've digitized. How are you going to catch them? It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, and on the business model side of this, you talk about in the book, and I've heard you mention this in a number of podcasts, like own the assets and the edge of how customers are consuming it. And one of the business models, out there, you can be the largest hotel company in the world by controlling other people's assets, and we just make it easy and we create the platform for all that to happen. Not everyone can do that. So for small and mid-sized businesses, where others are trying to control the edge of how people buy by using their assets, how can they think about modifying or evolving their business
Well,
models?
that's tough for a smaller player. So in that case, you have to, I think, diversify the platforms where you distribute, and not get captive with just one. And particularly because they're changing, right? Because, SEO doesn't mean so much anymore now with AI here. So how can you look at, how do I distribute my products? How can the manufacturer help me, right? How can the distributor help me if I'm the retailer? How can other people who are bigger than I help me distribute my products? And then where am I going to do it? I live in a small town in the mountains of Nevada up in Lake Tahoe, and 10 years ago, the biggest insurance guy in town and I were talking, and he said, I know I have to get more into the internet. I know I have to get more into YouTube and social networks. What should I do? I said, hire a kid. I said, you need to do this, but you don't know how. So actually he hired his own kids, and they went heavily into social media and got into two new lines of business in recreational sports insurance because they found groups of people online that they could reach that they never would have reached from this little town in Nevada. So it's really about looking across the mosaic of opportunities and saying, where can I, as a small business, be most effective? And let's not just get locked into one method of distribution.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. One question that came up getting ready for this interview was your ability to shift gears quickly. Because I get asked the question, how do you keep so many things going at once? All these different companies. I'm currently CEO of two, and I've just got a ton of stuff going. And I can see all of them, whether they're on track, at risk, or behind. I can keep track of it all the way through. And I've gotten to a place where I can just shift gears almost instantly. And then I look at LinkedIn, you've got 42 professional experiences. You're involved in so many different things. Do you intentionally think about that? Because you have to have that ability.
No, I guess I don't think about it. I think what's happened is, after I left Kayak, my business was basically as a board member, and I've served on boards of 20 companies now, both public and private, and a speaker and an author. And being a speaker, you get to see so many different industries. And I do research about so many different industries. And, upcoming speech, I dive deep into what that industry is about. I learn more about it. And what's cool is you can always apply the lessons from that industry to the next industry. And in fact, if I'm trying to convince somebody in the oil industry that here's some technology you ought to use, I'm not going to talk about the oil industry because they're not going to believe it. I'm not believable in the oil industry. Excuse me. But I'll talk about, what happened in agriculture or manufacturing or somewhere else. And you get them to connect the dots. Oh, I could do that. Right. Rather than telling them what to do, you kind of attract them with what to do. So I enjoy the diversity of thought, and, helping a bunch of different companies. I'm on the board of two cybersecurity companies. And, an AI company, and it just all gets wrapped up together. I think you have to thematically think about what is applicable from one industry to another, and how can I use my knowledge to help this industry with the idea from this other industry.
Yeah, I'm finding the same. I've started 8 companies from scratch, 3 exits, one for well into 9 figures, worked with hundreds of companies. I think it does let us connect dots a lot faster.
Yeah,
And for my own personal leadership development, this is one of the best things I've ever done. My podcast is an incredible education tool for.
sure. Because you're learning from all kinds of industry. I mean, think about McKinsey or Bain or those guys. Why are they so smart? Because they've done it for so many industries. And I think and they would always come in with a 200 slide deck, right, to tell you what to do. Now, I think McKinsey and some of the others have put all their slides into AI. So they have taken all the distilled knowledge of all their consultants. It's in one database, one LLM. What a what an incredible asset, of all the learning can be distilled and pulled out into lessons that can be used, by all of us. I'm on the board of a company where a guy like you was a CEO, and all he does is interviewed CEOs, and he's been doing it. He's got a print magazine and radio shows, and a bunch of us got together. He wanted to change. We said, first of all, you got to take all that and get it online and turn it into a podcast. And now what we'll end up with is the ability to ask a CEO, a virtual question against that database of knowledge. So what did Jack Welch think about this? Or, you know, what does the head of Disney think about that? It's there. You can do that now and really distill data into wisdom.
Yeah, and AI, and I listened to an example where Notebook LM from Google uh, produced from one YouTube video, produced a podcast with 2 hosts and guests calling in.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's so. I'm always wondering, like, is this real? Is this AI? What's happening here? And I want to get into AI in a second, but you talk about less capital and more speed, and what happens. To me, as I think about that, how do you reconcile the increase in change, like it's happening faster and faster and faster, with sort of this human nature not wanting to change, and what happens? Where's that line? You have to have been thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't know if change is happening faster or not. I mean, you think of 1850 to 1900. In 1850 we had kerosene lamps, horsepower, right? No real steam machines, no fast way of communication. By 1920, you had steamships, 80-mile-an-hour trains, communications at the speed of light, electric light. I mean, it changed society way more, I think, than we're getting changed today. Now, but the head of Western Union said, "Why would I want to talk to anybody?" The head of Warner Brothers said, "Who wants to see movies where people talk?" Um, we don't always envision how these changes are going to affect us. I think that what I talk about when I talk to corporations about change, um, I think the most important thing for them to do is to experiment and fail. And every company was started by a risk taker. You're a risk taker. You founded companies. Edison was a risk taker. Watson of IBM was a risk taker. Ford was a risk taker. But as companies get big, they ossify and they optimize for earnings rather than bet on the future generally. And they don't want to lose any money, and CFOs don't want to lose money, so they don't let you make a mistake. And if you don't make mistakes, you don't move forward. So you really have to have, I mean, we used to have big labs like Bell Labs and those things. We don't have those anymore. We really, in every company, you have to be experimenting, and the leader has to push that. I mean, if you look at companies that, a fraction of companies are being successful with AI, the ones that are, the leadership is all using AI, and they understand what it can do, and they're pushing their teams to do it.
I like the point about you learn a lot when you fail and having a culture that within reason allows that to happen. You mentioned Jack Welch earlier. He was actually my business partner in my consulting business before he passed a few
Really?
years ago. I still stay in touch with his wife. Um, but you think about when he blew the lid basically off the building of his chemical plant, he didn't get fired. What did you learn? And then he leveraged that to run at the time, build the most valuable company on the
Right.
planet. Just incredible. On the AI side, your AI maturity level graph that you put together, you've got lab projects, building applications, strategic direction for the business. How can organizations think about using it? It's interesting that at the front line it's being used more, the tools, but it's not fully getting up to the top.
Yeah, I think it's great. Most of the uses of AI today are around productivity, right? So it's personal productivity. You use ChatGPT personally. Use it when you write documents. You use it to help you think about the future. We're seeing it in coding, right? We're seeing it in customer service. We're seeing it in user interface, and we're seeing it in personal productivity, and that's all fine. Um, but that's a race on saving money, and you're never going to win the battle. You can't save your way to success. I mean, it's great, and we should all do it. But I think the most important thing to understand, somebody told me at IBM once that the most impactful applications will be built in AI using public data. And today that would be OpenAI or Perplexity, industry data. That might be a trade association or other data that looks across the industry and collects data, Bloomberg, and corporate data, which is not out there. And put that in a new recipe to create a new product. And remember that it is a learning system. So one of the AI companies that I worked with a hospital, and they collected weather data and patient data, hospitalization data, bunch of other data, put it together around allergies. So when the pollen count was off the chart in Dallas, they went and said, okay, these people all need to be informed by email. These people need inhalers. These people don't have insurance and are going to come into the hospital in an ambulance. Let's send them Ubers, and tried a whole bunch of things to proactively go after this health event. And then, of course, at the end, they said, what did we learn, and how can we reinforce that loop, and what did the AI learn? And that's putting, public data and corporate data together in a whole new way to create a new product. And the data about products, look at American Airlines, multi-billion-dollar Sabre company that automates travel agents. That was the data about travel. It didn't have anything to do with flying airplanes. And for a time, it was worth more than the airline itself. So the data we've collected, we can now turn hopefully into wisdom and new products with AI, and let those products learn and get better over time.
So let's play that out. We're senior leadership team. You make a distinction around we should be solving real problems. Probably should explain what you meant by that. I thought that was really spot on. And then we're a senior team. We want to use AI to make better decisions to more fully or actually solve the problem. So, Leah, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, I think you can use it to make better decisions by collecting data, but also, I think more importantly, use it in your products. So Tom Friedman wrote recently, he was in China, and sort of every product there has AI in it, even when it doesn't make sense. They're trying everything. And so I think if you can step back and say, like GE did with their jet engines, we can sell power by the hour. They did that with locomotives as well, because they had enough data to say, what kind of uptime do you want? And we'll do exactly what you did with the helicopters. We'll guarantee a price for a period of time. That's a whole new product. So I think thinking about how you want to embed AI in your manufacturing process, terrific. That's going to make you more reliable, more quality, and reduce costs. But also, what can I do in the product itself to change it? I mean, look, it's a crazy little product, but I have an AI bird feeder that has a camera in it, and it not only sends you a picture of the bird, it identifies the bird. Well, have seen more birds up here, Lake Tahoe, in the last year than I've ever seen because I don't see them in the woods. But they come to my feeder and now they get identified, and it's fun. It's great. Um, and, you know, that's a small market, but how else can you change? You know, my doctor uh, said if you get an Apple Watch and wear that for 3 months and it doesn't show any signs of AFib, I think your AFib has gone away. I'm going to take you off Eliquis. And now, you know, you've got these watches that do so much diagnosis, it's changing healthcare. My dog has a GPS collar because he wanders a lot. But over the last 4 years, now the GPS collar says how much is Winston eating, scratching, sleeping, drinking, playing, and ta-da, it will say, Winston's not feeling very well. He's off his food. He's not drinking. Would you like to talk to a vet? Press this button for a Zoom call with a vet. So now the collar on the pet became lead generation for the vet. Otherwise, the vet, I'd give him away, right? So there's really innovative thinking about how do I move from selling a piece of iron to selling a service that keeps dogs healthy. That's where we ought to be thinking.
Incredible. Do you still wear an implanted heart monitoring device?
No, I did. I did a long time ago for, and they took that out. And then, you know, now I just have this watch and I'm going to the doctor. It's tomorrow and we'll see if he says, yeah, you're okay now, just use the watch. And if it tells you something, and we've all read the stories about people saved by their watch, GPS and stuff. But I think it's looking at the product you have, whether it's a tractor or a light bulb or a GPS collar, and stepping back and say, how can we go more upstream? How can we provide more value to people? How can we embed AI and machine learning to improve our product in ways that our competitors can't? And what data do we have around that product to make it more useful? I mean, and the combination, AI to me is an additive. So you think about AI and machine vision and drones, and you put them together and people are using them to inspect buildings for cracks. And they're inspecting electrical grid yards for potential rust so you don't get sparking and fires and lose power. So how do you combine these products into something that's really fascinating, that can do things faster or cheaper? They have AI-based sensors they're putting into concrete now that will tell the builder this concrete is cured enough, you can now move to the next floor. So rather than taking 5 days, well, it might take 5 days in some weather, but another day, it might take 2 days because the weather's better. And that can speed up construction. Or, another company is using GPS with AI to track all the tools on a job site. So not only where did Bob leave the wrench, but hey, Bob's in the bar with the drill. He's gone. So let's take that back. So it's just, we've got so many different interesting new technologies, from digital twins with learning to IoT devices to drones to machine vision to robots that have 5 senses. How can we put those together in a new way to do great things for our customers?
Yeah, and I think framing that's the challenge. And I heard you say that, most big data projects fail. So you've got all this information, but we haven't organized it in a way that's really going to help us create more value in the world.
Well, and what I hope, I've always talked in my lectures about data silos and blowing up the silos and trying to get the data together. It's tough, because customer service has certain needs and marketing has different needs. But, when HTML came along in the browser, of course, I was involved in the consumer-facing part of that, but many, many companies built intranets, and they used HTML to paper over those terrible mainframe Kix interfaces that everybody saw at the airport, right? Terrible blank screens, to make systems accessible to their employees. Well, I think you can do the same thing with AI and data. I think AI can be the lipstick on the pig of data. And now people are creating hierarchies of data and extracting data and using MCP and other interfaces to really take data, because AI is so good with unstructured data. And, it's not just rows and columns of numbers. It's videos and blogs and posts and text and all kinds of things, and put that together in a way that makes the company's data accessible and allow people to create intelligence out of it in new ways. And when I was working with IBM, one of the sales guys said, he had sold an AI product to one of the three-letter agencies in Washington. So think CIA, FBI, NSA, one of them. And the people there said, the first thing we learned with AI is we got answers much faster. And that was great. But then we realized we could ask harder questions. And I think that's a really good insight. You talked about making decisions better, and that's exactly right. I can ask a harder question of my data to understand our customer or understand how they like the product. I work with another company who uses sentiment analysis. So it can tell you by reading all the social media about your product, what is Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, what are they saying about your product? How do they think about it differently? What words do they use? Or what words should you use when you talk to them about your product? Or you're going to bring out a new brand that's going to compete with this brand that's already there. Let us tell you what people are saying about that brand, and use AI to analyze the sentiment of what they say so you can position your product effectively against what people think about that product.
And that should all help us ideate significantly faster.
Absolutely. As long as we're allowed to fail. Because I once talked, I had an all-day seminar with a big insurance carrier, and we talked about all kinds of automation and innovation in every department. And, one of the people came up and said, well, I innovated. And I said, what did you do? And this was maybe 5 years ago, 7. She said, I unlocked our PDF forms online so people could actually fill them in and submit them without printing them and writing them by hand. And, I didn't want to say that the IRS did that like 10 years before, but it was innovation to them, and it was innovation to their customer. And then at the end of the meeting, the chairman came in and said, I'm glad that you spent a whole day talking about innovation, but don't run around with your hair on fire. I want you to innovate about only this one thing. And the air just went out of the room. I mean, because he had just said, I had this idea and this is what I want you to do. And, that woman in forms who fixed the form would never have done that because she couldn't work on that. That's wrong. You really want innovation, can be around anything. It can be around and AI does that, whether it's your service capability, your marketing capability, your programming, or your product itself.
Yeah, Jack Welch and I used to talk about innovation, and we were pretty aligned on it. It's any improvement anywhere from micro to macro, doesn't matter. Better way today than the day before. And we should have everybody in the organization engaged in that mindset. And so what does that look like in an organization? How do you install it? And then at what point and why? Like, what are the forces that are against it? Does it go away? But some
Well,
organizations,
there are many forces against it, of course. But I think culture is the big one. I think, Jack Welch, great example of saying, I want you to experiment. I want you to change. It's not, we're not going to be the company we were. I mean, he transformed General Electric into, from an electrical utility products company and into automotives and jet engines trucks and jet engines and finance and all kinds of other things, because he maybe overextended it. We'll see. That story has been written on that. But if you have a culture where people are allowed to experiment and they're allowed to fail, and today you can build prototypes, you can use AI simulation, you can use 3D printing. You don't have to fail big. You can fail small, and you can get consumer input super easily on the internet. So it's pretty easy to experiment and change all the time if people allow it, and if the budget allows for it, and that you get some money to spend on it. I mean, you've got to get around the CFOs who say we can't lose a dollar, and you've got to get around the people who say we've always done it that way. At American Airlines, for a while, we had an idea program, and that program, you'd submit a new idea, and I think this program actually came from GE, and that your idea was approved or reviewed not only by your boss, but by bosses from two other departments, and that got you around the naysayer. We had a guy in maintenance who invented that little walk the plank thing that they put at the end of a jet bridge to connect to a regional jet. Because regional jets, you had to walk down the stairs in the rain and the snow. Well, he proposed that before the idea program and was shot down by the head of maintenance, who said, "Oh, jet bridges are expensive and we're out here in the rain. Maybe customers should be too." Hell with that. And then we got this new idea program. That idea got over to marketing and to finance, and they went nuts. So you have to get around the naysayer, and you have to let ideas, bubble up. And the leader has to say, this is Bob's idea and it failed, and this is Larry's idea and it succeeded, and this is Barbara's idea and it's failed. By the way, we're promoting Barbara, because it wasn't her fault it failed. It was just a bad idea, but boy, she's really trying. When people hear that, that they have permission to succeed and fail, but we want them just to move forward, then they're going to take chances. Otherwise, they keep their head down. They don't want to get it chopped off. So they take the easy way out.
Yeah, I found decades ago the suggestion box is a terrible idea. And then I switched to, for a lot of reasons, and I switched to if you have something that can improve the business in some way, and I always try to connect everybody to doing their part in their role to increasing the value of the business continually and responsibly over time. That's my number one job as a CEO, and I think that should be for all CEOs. But if they had an idea that would improve cash flow, profitability, improve customer experience, internal or external, they could run with it. And all they had to do was document that. And if it was bigger than what they could handle, they took it to their boss and the team. Bigger than that, they just kept working it up the food chain, all the way to me if necessary. And the innovation from everybody was incredible. Like those were the guardrails and the process I put in place for it. We celebrated it. One year just in just the manufacturing part of our repair and overhaul facility, we saved 200,000 hours, i.e. doing jobs with that much less time. So as we grew, we didn't hire as many people, saved 100 people from being hired as we grew. That's incredible. Did it organization wide, but how many in your experience, Terry, ever do that? I mean, like very few have systems like that.
Not many. I mean, that's why businesses taper off and fail. But, Shell, for example, realized their own bureaucracy was getting in the way of ideas. So if you had an idea that didn't get approved by your boss, you could take it to an internal Kickstarter, and they'd try it. They'd say, if that's a good enough idea, we'll fund it over here. Let's see if it works. That's why it's fascinating to see big companies like Bose, trying out products on Kickstarter. Because, it didn't work internally. We don't want to do a big launch, but boy, it's a good idea. They tried out these snoring earbuds, and they put them on Kickstarter. I said, what's a big company like that doing on Kickstarter? They're finding out if people like it at very low cost and actually getting other people to pay for that, for their R&D. Fascinating, and Shell was big enough to say, we'll do that internally. So, I ran some labs at American Airlines. Running labs is tough. We had great ideas, but we found that when we took them out to the divisions, they weren't the division's idea, so they wouldn't do it. So we found we had to be, a porpoise riding the bow wave of a oil tanker. They're right there. We had to be that close to the business and listen to them, but also explain what technology could do with them and to their products in a way that they would listen, rather than just coming in from outer space and saying, hey, this is a great idea. You ought to use this. And then you're just like a vendor trying to break in. It's pretty hard.
Well, it's not so easy, because an idea or initiative that failed, it's not necessarily true that it was wrong. We might not have had a capable team. There could have been hidden agendas around the whole thing, right?
Or maybe the timing was just wrong. I mean, look, I spent $1 million on Travelocity building out a fare calendar. Because in those days, in the early days, you look actually in the newspaper and it'd say Hawaii $99, and you'd call and you could never get that fare because it was only on a certain day. And you'd say, I want to go June 1st. They said, not available. June 2nd? No. When is it available? I don't know, because the system wouldn't tell them when it was available. So I spent $1 million, 30-day calendar showed you where the low prices were. Nobody used it. Now everybody has it 20 years later, but it was just too early in the adoption cycle. People were still worried about, can I put my credit card in online? Is this thing going to work? And, so we were showing space travel to a caveman, right? It was too early. And I've had a number of those too earlys. But that doesn't mean the idea is bad. And you're right. It may have been a poor team, or, or it may have been the idea was terrible and the team tried the best they could. Okay, that's fine, because one of those is going to work. There's a graph from Harvard called something like the golden formula of innovation. And people usually spend like 70% on their core product and 20% on adjacent products and 10% on radical ideas. But if you look out 10 years, most of their future revenue will generally come from one of those radical ideas. Now look at the Swiffer mop, right? I mean, it's a diaper on a stick. But hey, they made diapers, they made chemicals. It's $1 billion business, just by recombining what they already had. But it's pretty radical jump to get into floor mopping for a diaper company. But they did.
I think one of the biggest problems to solve for, or opportunities, however you want to look at it, is getting people at scale to do hard things that are really good for them. It's like move right, nourish right, eat right, self-talk right, and all of that. And so many struggle with that. They know what they need to do. They don't do it. That's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, is like, how do we use technology, language, AI to get them on a track where they'll never want to get off again because they just do it. It's like I get up at 4 every morning. I exercise. I mean, it's like breathing for me. I get ready for the day. I'm not sure if this is good or bad. I've read 3 books in the last 7 days. I've started a 4th one. 2 of those were yours, by the way, and I've learned
Well, thank you for that.
so
And
much, so much from you, and I appreciate it. And
on Innovation and Disruption Off for the audience, available on Amazon, and they're in audio as well.
yeah. So how would you think about that challenge, getting people
that is tough. I don't think everybody is as motivated as you. For example, after this call, I'm going to my trainer, and I go 3 days a week. And I have, equipment here in the house, but I know I'm paying for this guy, and I've got my hour, and I'm going to go. And so I think it depends. People are very different, and some people need support. I mean, why are, now you can have a trainer on video in an app, and I could probably switch to that, and then I have some of those apps. But I enjoy working with a coach, working with somebody else. So I don't think we're all the same, but I think AI can certainly help us, and see it as a tool. I'm on a board of a nonprofit, and the chairman was here, and it's a boys and girls outdoor camp. And, I asked him, I said, how are you using AI? It's a camp. And he said, I use it every day to improve my writing, to improve my communication. We're using it to analyze images. What are we going to put in the newsletter? All that kind of stuff. So even in those kind of businesses where we're very fundamental and we're teaching people about the outdoors, and these kids cannot have phones for 4 weeks, which is awesome. Their parents love it. But that doesn't mean we can't use AI in other parts of the business to improve, our communications, our customer service, our customer interaction.
What drove you to the Camping and Education Foundation? I noticed that in my research.
I went to a boys' camp for 10 summers when I was a kid, and just fell in love with the outdoors and canoeing and rough trips and being in the woods. And my son wanted the same experience I had, but my camp had closed. So there was another camp about 100 miles away and in Canada, and he went there, and I got involved with the board and then became chairman. And then, amazingly, my old camp, which had become a private island, somebody bought the island, it came up for sale. So another guy and I raised the money and we bought it and we donated that to the Camping and Education Foundation. And now we're revitalizing that old camp when I get to go up there every summer and, do brushing and painting and work on the facility. And we help hundreds of disadvantaged youth get out in the woods, which is terrific. These kids have never built a fire. They've never been on a boat, never been on a lake. And they've never been off their phone. So it's kind of transformative.
Thank you for doing that. That's incredible. I spent my childhood camping probably 2.5 months every summer along the Canadian border. Loved it.
In where?
I grew up in Spokane, Washington, so we would drive up north and
Yeah, we're in the boundary waters in north of Minnesota. So same kind of Canadian border. And it's terrific. Yeah, it's so good for the kids. And getting them off their phones. Kudos to Australia for banning social media for up to 15. I think it's pretty corrosive.
yeah, I took my sister's grandkids to Yellowstone this last summer, where we stayed. No technology, no phones, iPads, or we're outside playing tetherball, watching for deer and bison, and had such a good time with zero technology. I
Well,
loved it.
I'll tell you a Yellowstone story very quickly. I took my kids to Yellowstone, and this was 20 years ago plus, and we didn't have cell phones, and we forgot to bring a camera. So we took brain pictures. We would line up together and say, well, we're going to take a picture, and we'd take a picture of the moose in front of the lodge or whatever it was. But here's what important. At night, we developed them. So at night, we would go through and say, okay, let's review the pictures and kind of keep them in our memory. And by the end of the trip, we had about 30 that we remembered. And 20 years later, we can still pull up 3 or 4, So it was an interesting non-tech way to train yourself to, change your perspective, right? I don't need a camera. I got a pretty good one here.
Incredible. I love that. For our listeners, Terry, as we start to wrap up here, how can they learn more about your work and connect with you?
Well, terryjones.com, TERRY, terryjones.com. There's tons of video there you can watch and on YouTube. So you can learn more about what I do. I am a professional speaker on innovation, disruption, and AI. So I've done that for 20 years and I really enjoy getting out doing it. I do mentorship for startups, and you can find me on the website and connect. So I'm happy to, at this stage of my life, it's mostly about how can I help people.
I love that. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, just get out there and fail. Get out there and fail fast and fail small. Use these tools, whether it's 3D printing or AI testing or digital twins, where you can fail softly and fast and you can iterate, and, get on the next wave. And it is AI, but move beyond just productivity. How can you embed it in your product? How can you embed it in what you do with your customer and let it learn and help you differentiate and move faster than your competitor will? Because if his system is learning and yours isn't, you're toast.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing so much wisdom today. I've learned a ton from you. Appreciate you being here.
Great for being on. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, please like and subscribe. And until next time, show your value to the world.